Let's
here.
go.
We're here. We already went. We're here. We've arrived. It was a
Hello.
long walk. Hello.
Oh my gosh, so long.
So long. We barely made it, fam. That's what took us so long. It's true. It's true. Thank you so much for coming back. I had you on the Upliftathon. You came onto my show like sometime recently, and you're here again. So I'm gonna assume that you hate me.
No, I'm just becoming a regular.
Ooh, yeah, there you go.
There we go.
The safe point regular. I like that.
I love that. I'm here for that.
Yeah, right. I think it means wonderful magic is happening, and that's what matters.
Here for that.
I don't think I've asked you, actually. We were talking about magic and Disney princesses. Do you have a favorite Disney princess?
Oh my God. Not one that comes to mind immediately.
Okay.
I'd have to probably like think about it.
Fair.
I'd probably have to say like maybe Mulan, just because she's pretty kick-ass.
Yeah, she kicks a lot of butt. A lot of butt. She's my partner's favorite. Growing up, he's like, that's who I wanted to be. I was like, okay.
She's great. Totally I mean, she's great. Love that.
Hi. Okay. All right. So, I should do an introduction, right? Like a professional and stuff. But hi everyone. This is Mxiety, the show about a little bit of everything, but mostly mental health. The goal is to make mental health conversation accessible to everyone. We do that by talking to mental health advocates and mental health professionals. Today we are sitting down with a wonderfully kind mental health advocate and LGBTQIA2+. Yeah, the plus covers everything else. Okay, advocate. Okay. Hi, yes. Jeff.
Hello. It's so good to be here again.
I am so excited. I'm so excited to have you here. So can you give peeps an overview of what you do? And I'm gonna spam your links in the meantime.
Please, thank you.
Yeah.
Love that.
Yeah.
So for those who don't know me, my name is Jeff. I am a full-time streamer here on Twitch. In my channel, we are typically doing lots of like playthroughs of story-driven games. We love to do like spooky games, sometimes some Nintendo games and some simulation games, depending on what we're vibing with. But no matter what we're doing, it is intended to be a safe space specifically for the queer community or anybody who is going to come in and maintain those safe space vibes. And I'm also a writer. That's been a little slower, especially with Pride Month happening. But I do love writing fiction and creative nonfiction, and also like opinion pieces about being in the queer community, and sometimes that intersection of that as well as being a gamer.
Yes, and they're all wonderful. The ones I've had to read are absolutely lovely. Yes. Okay, well, so that's amazing. That's great. I wanted to ask you, so what makes a safe space for you? And I know that's like a super broad topic, but we're stepping into the unknown here, and I'm not gonna sing.
I was about to, and then I was like,
I'm singing in my head. Can everybody hear it? Everybody can hear it, right? Because it's very loud.
I love it. I can hear it too.
Okay, great. Anyway, so stepping into this topic, like what, in your opinion, makes a safe space, and how do you maintain that? Because there's a ton of non-safe spaces on Twitch.
I think with safe spaces, especially when it comes to how I think about them, is definitely in terms of thinking about, how it's geared to be welcoming to marginalized communities specifically. Because there's a lot of language sometimes in other spaces, or a lot of behaviors in other spaces that would be very off-putting or very unsafe for people who are in marginalized communities, whether it's being in the queer community, whether you're a person of color, whether you are even disabled. Like, there are a lot of things that people can say, or like and it will put out a vibe that will just be like, this probably isn't for me. So I think for me, what a safe space is like putting into consideration and like thinking ahead to like, if we do this, how will people feel about being here and their safety as a whole?
So I often, not often, but sometimes I think, what would a bigot do right now?
Right.
And then I try not to do that. But so I guess that's my question. Like, how do you keep on top of, because there's this idea that like, everybody's offended all the time. How do you like my bigot impression? Pretty good, right?
That's how they sound.
Yeah, that's exactly it. So everybody's offended all the time over everything. So how do you keep track of what not to be, like what not to put out there? And is that the heckin' point? I'm asking a totally leading question.
You're fine. No, I think you have to, especially when it comes to running a community, you sometimes have to definitely look outside of yourself and be like, okay, even though I am not personally offended within my personal circles when we say things like this, I do know this has hit a nerve with communities outside of me. So because of that, I should be sure to be careful of that. I think that's really the best way to put it. I think some people get a little too loud about being like, everybody's offended about everything. It's like, well, no, things are changing.
Right.
We're learning, implications, and we're starting to learn that like the people who were actually very offended back then are now just having a platform to be loud about it.
Right. Have every right to be offended and should have been offended for a very long time. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Lame. We have a thing in our community where we hug people. Are you comfy being virtually hugged by my community? You
Yes.
can say no. Okay. Yes. Okay. Send the hugs, Lame. Send the hugs.
The hugs are great. I love hugs.
Excellent. I miss hugging people. Speaking of which, I don't know if I'm like out for PAX West, which is apparently happening in person.
Oh, shoot, when?
September.
Oh, I might have to. I might have to look into that because I've never been.
Right. Well, okay. So PAX is awesome, but I'm like debating. What do you think? Do you think Twitch is gonna TwitchCon?
I don't think so. At this rate, like they would have had to been planning for so long, I feel like, and then
they usually announce it during the summer, though.
Yeah. So we'll see. If they do, I feel okay going, but like it'll depend on how many other people are going to be going, I guess, for whether or not I personally will.
Yeah. Yeah. But it's one of those weird things where like the whole point of going is so that I see everybody, but I also am very worried about seeing everybody because that's a lot of people. Like TwitchCon normally is a ton of people. And then if they gate it, like what did they gate it based on? Like only partners can go, but then where's your audience? Like,
I mean, it sounds like it's going to be first come, first serve if they're going to like keep a cap on how many people can come. So
I don't know. Totally off topic. Completely off topic. But yeah, okay. So everybody's offended, but not really, or shouldn't be. Everybody's offended, and we're worried about like maintaining these safe structures and keeping our spaces cozy from people. So like, for example, stuff is happening all the time on Twitter, and I'm gonna be completely honest, I have a very hard time hecking keeping up. So like, and part of it is also like it's exhausting, right? And there's a part of like acknowledge your privilege, and like if it's exhausting for you, only imagine how tiring it is to people who are like immediately affected by those words that they're saying. But like, how do you filter out what the heck to react to and what to just like leave on the side?
Well, so on a personal note, I'm one of those people that loves like reality shows. So like when I see drama unfolding, like I'm sitting there, I don't have any like glasses or anything, but I'm just sitting there kind of like binoculars, like from a distance being like, oh, drama on the timeline. But when it's not drama, when it's definitely like big serious issues happening, I think when it comes to how much I'm going to involve myself, it has to do with like who's involved and if there's somebody that I consider like an acquaintance or a friend. If it's something that, goes into my lane as far as like what I brand myself as or like what topics I tend to talk about most often. And whether or not I feel like it's something that I need to take a stance on like myself with my own voice. I think that's kind of what I weigh out the most when it comes to reading into whatever's going on, especially around online discourse.
I think it's super tough, especially on Twitter. One, parasocial relationships make things difficult. So like I run into the like, okay, I feel like I know this person because I talk to them and I respond to their tweets and they respond to my tweets, but like, are we actually friends? Are we not friends? Do I get involved in that perspective? Are they expecting me to get involved because you know, this is affecting them, and like as their friend I should be speaking up to let them know that I like stand with them and support them. But then there's the other side of just there's a lot going on, and a lot of it is like I have a very hard time balancing this is my business and this isn't my business.
Right. Ooh,
Right.
very, very that. It's hard because I think when you're looking at it, kind of like when you're with your points about parasocial relationships, I think for me, I kind of, you know, I try to analyze like, yeah, what are our interactions like when we're like interacting on the timeline? Like, do I feel like this person is genuinely like one way or another? Like, and then like if it's something that I feel like maybe I just need to kind of be like a supportive ear, you know, if it's someone that I feel comfortable enough kind of going in DMs and being like, hey, I see what you're going through, just letting you know that I'm here. If you need to chat about anything. I think that can be kind of a really nice way to like even take that balance of like, I don't need to be public about this because it might be a little too draining for me to like start getting involved in this and trying to figure out what I need to say, but more so just like finding out who's involved and like, and if it's somebody that you know personally, kind of being like, just letting you know that I'm here.
How do you figure out, like genuinely, how the heck do you figure out when oh, brain fart, cool, good timing.
Love that.
Thanks brain, awesome time.
Perfect.
How do you figure out when it's like not only just commenting on, when it's part of like the bigger zeitgeist, when it's something that is just like important to comment on outside? Because again, like I run into a lot of issues with that. Like I'm no longer here for the 50th discussion about bubbies and how they're stealing people's views. There is a conversation to be had there about toxic masculinity and stuff, and I like that that's the angle that like you're carrying it with, and I appreciate that. Although I'm sorry that you're literally being hit over the head with that as well. But I have a very hard time with just parsing out, this is mine, this is not mine, I'm gonna stay out of this, I should comment on this, I should say something, versus like being quiet on it. And I've run it by the community too, and the community is like, listen, we don't need every one of your takes, but like it is good to know where you stand on things. But when it feels like, you know, when you like watch dirty laundry, like people pulling stuff onto the timeline that you're like, that didn't need to be on the timeline, but we're here and now we're all watching it unfold. And it's very hard. Like there's no way to ignore that because it's there. And
right.
Like, so what do you heckin' do? Like, I don't know. Jeff, help me. I need like, I need a better radar for this stuff, honestly.
You know, I always feel like I'm like approaching it in a healthy way, but like, you know, I think everyone's version of what's going to help them is different. So it's hard to like say, but I think for me, it's that balance of like, is what the person is doing harming people? Is this something where like there needs to be voices speaking out against it so that people can have a clear indicator of, oh, this person that I follow and whose spaces I frequent don't agree with this harmful view coming along. And I think that's when it's a really good time to take that stance. But, you know, when it comes to things like, you know, what you brought up earlier, like boobs are stealing my viewers, like that discourse has gone through it again. And I think that like came about like maybe 6 months after I started streaming regularly, and like it just keeps coming back. And I'm like, dude, we can only say so much about that.
Well, but like, I think what it is whenever a new person comes into Twitch and they gain a little bit of traction, I think they like haven't read the room enough yet, and then they think that this is the hot take. That's my like ongoing hypothesis about that.
I can see that. And then the thing with hot takes is like
they're sometimes not so hot.
They're sometimes very lukewarm.
Yeah, sometimes they're potatoes.
Yeah, and you know what? Your hot takes aren't always needed. And I'm just gonna say it. I don't think you necessarily get gigs or opportunities with hot takes.
But you get the engagement.
You get engagement. There is a nice
I become lobster claws. That's where you.
There is a nice level of like, you know, instant gratification from it. Yes. Right. And I think, you know what, do you like whatever helps you feel good about your timeline, go for it. But definitely make sure you're thinking when you call things out about like, what is the impact of this going to be?
I'm sorry. I know there was a second part of that sentence, right, but I like that you're just like, make sure that you are using your brain before you say stuff. But it's true.
Like, and you know, and I think there's like a level of like, you're able to speak to like, if you're being reactionary. I think a lot of people try to like discourage that, but like, there are some, you know, marginalized groups out there where like we've heard things time and time again to where like, if you're gonna say some like obnoxious shit to us, especially regarding our identities, like we're gonna clap back and it's gonna look reactionary, and that's because we've heard that time and time and time again, and just keeps building to a point where now people say those things. We're like, you poke the bear, you're gonna get, you know, you're gonna get what the bear gives back.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. There is a whole like, okay, so there's a difference between, because there is a moment, right? I don't know who said this. I know somebody really way smarter than me said this, but there is a moment in between you taking in information and then you putting something out where you can think, right? Where you have, it might not even be that long of a time. It might just be like minutes, might be seconds, but embracing that moment is something that not a lot of people do, right? And that's that reactionary part. But if you're talking about like, for example, if your hot potato take is that bisexual people are not really gay because they're half bisexual or they all cheat on their partners or whatever, like, you don't think I haven't laid awake at night thinking about clapbacks for that? This is not a 1 second reaction. This is me being like, oh, next time I hear that, I know what I'm going to say. And then you happened to give this crappy take for the 14 bajillionth time. And I was there and I was ready. And I'm ready to tell you exactly what I think about that.
Thank goodness. And thank goodness you were. No, like there's just things that you don't need to say. And I think something I often think about too, like, is the word nuance. There's a streamer I follow who, when like it was something was going on the timeline, and she put up a whole thread. It was Pleasantly Twisted. She put up a whole thread.
She's awesome.
I love her, about nuance and how, you know, you can't just look at situations as, you know, like black and white. Like there are shades of gray in so many things to where like you can't look at something and be like, oh, that person is bad because this, or oh, that person is now good because this. Like, no, like you have to make sure you're taking in all the points of information and then make a choice that's good for you. So when it comes to like responding to hot takes or giving your own hot takes, I think sometimes, like, again, and I advocate for whatever makes you feel good, go for it, as long as it's not harming anybody. But like, definitely think about what is the lasting impact going to be if I put this out here? Because the thing is, I think people tend to forget that tweets exist forever, even if you delete them.
Yep. They do. They really do. Yeah. First seek to understand. It's almost like a script. It is. That's really interesting. It is like a script after a bit. Yeah. Huh. Interesting. So when, I want to actually dive in a little bit closer onto and like, you've been fighting toxic masculinity. It's been a pretty hot topic recently. And there's a few tweets that you've let out that, speaking of tweets being forever, I want to talk about them because they're absolutely wonderful. And you know, I give you claps and flowers whenever I can and whenever I see them. And Twitter lets me see them mostly. But so, man, toxic masculinity. Why do people get so upset? So for context, so today, Jeff tweeted something, and the response that they got was that he just had it easy, of all reasons, because you were gay. And not only that you were gay, you chose to be gay because it was the easy solution. I don't know what was it the solution for, but it was an easy way to solve.
It was an easy way to get away from toxic masculinity.
Oh, that's what it was. Yes.
I'm telling you, the layers that I saw in that tweet, I was like, I'm not even gonna like break this down because like it speaks for itself.
Yeah, no,
and just like all this being
goes.
like,
yeah, it just goes. It just goes on its own.
Yeah, and so I think,
like, how do you respond? What goes through your mind, I guess, when you respond to something like that?
So my thought process when I saw that was like, I know there's somebody out there who might think something. I think for me, especially with that specific comment, was definitely, this misconception that like being in the LGBTQIA community means that we're all like this one big community of like people that just get along and we're like a hive mind and we all think the same way. Oh, do I have some news for people who think that? So when I saw that, like, oh, you chose to be gay to escape toxic masculinity, I thought about all the times that I'm like, that I've seen on like dating profiles, like not into femme guys, not into like mask only, like muscular this, like I want a guy who wants to like go, like I can't even tell you how much like very like passive toxic masculinity I've seen, to the point where I'm like, this is not okay. Like if I were to go into this whole conversation, there's a lot we can talk about, like how gay men feel like it's very easy to be like misogynistic toward women and think it's okay. So like there's so much of it still in the community. So like for me, I saw that and I was like, this is what I'm going to say, because I know people out there probably think like this person, but maybe not to their extreme. So I think I put that out there being like, don't be this person. This is not the take.
That's not, again, another not so hot potato.
Right.
I actually want to dive further into that hive mind, because people who have been, God, I'm going to use this word. There's a better word. Yes. People who have been held accountable online love talking about the fact that there is a hive mind. But it's also an unpredictable hive mind. Like the same people who will say there's a hive mind and you have to obey and be like super PC and whatever, other their problem is, they will also talk about the fact that it's like unpredictable because you don't know what people are going to be upset about today. And the two, really quickly, with just a glance of logic, you can realize that the two don't really match up. And I do kind of, I was wondering if we wanted to address that and talk about that. Like, is there a hive mind?
A hive mind for
I don't
who?
know. I don't know. The truth for social justice? I don't know. Like, did all of Tumblr fall into Twitter? And now, like, people who are not PC are destined to forever be canceled. I can't say these words. I'm sorry.
Oh God! See, the fact that you tripped over the word canceled, I was like, that's funny. That's funny to me.
I was trying so hard. I was like, it's a cancel. It's a cancel. You cancel your subscription. And also, it's really interesting to me because I never hear people. It's people who talk about being canceled. Like, for example, Kevin Hart most recently talked about being canceled. And then somebody posted his IMDb and how he's going to be in like 4 movies next year. And like, bruh, were you going to be in 6? Is that the problem? And you only like left with 4? Is that the issue? So that's
what's going on there.
Right.
Well, no, like, I think there is somewhat of a hive mind of people that, think along those same lines when it comes to quote unquote being canceled. But I think the hive mind I'm more speaking to is like people thinking that like, we are just one big conglomeration when it comes to being in a community, and that we all don't have our own opinions on what we think is like good for the community. Like it's a lot of it sometimes is, I think sometimes you can have like a very like, oh, this is good. Like us having rights. Yep, not really up for debate. Like we should have rights.
What the hell? So that's kind of, I'm alluding to this and like kind of answer, but that's the common thread. Like if the hive mind, if you're calling a hive mind people fighting for basic human dignity, okay, you know what? I am part of that hive mind.
I'm part of it.
I tend to only think about I spend a lot of time thinking about whether or not people have access to things that they should have access to. I do.
Exactly.
I do. And then do you
Yeah,
want to say hi? Do you want to say hi?
He
I
will
see a
come up
little
here.
tail and I heard a little wee.
Oh my God.
Excuse me.
Yeah, okay, here he is.
There
Here he
we
is. I was
are.
wondering if you were going to come up and say
Of
hello.
course. Hello.
For the people at home, this is Smokey.
Hi, Smokey.
He's a big baby, so he'll probably be up here for a little bit until he decides that he's done.
Yeah, but we love Smokey. He's a
good bean.
He's
a good baby.
Good baby. I do that all the time. I tell that to Flannel. I come up to him, I bop his nose and go, "You're a good baby. Are you a good baby?" And he's very happy with himself because he knows he's a good baby.
He is a good baby.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Okay, if you want more, please go follow Jeff's everything. There's links everywhere. Okay. All right. So basically my answer is like, if the hive mind is basic human rights, I am in.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know if that's like the end of that conversation, but I guess
no,
that's it.
I think there's probably something to say about how people who scream cancel culture are, doing that as a way of putting the blame on the people holding them accountable, in a way that's like, you have no other defense other than you're just saying they're trying to cancel me. Like,
but so somebody recently made a really, really, really great thread about this. And yes, boy, Kitty. Somebody made a really good thread about this, and I may have written an article that you edited about it as well.
Mm-hmm.
But that whole concept of like, and this is gonna sound so dumb, and it's so dumb that it's almost manipulative to say, but I'm gonna say it. We're gonna see how much I regret it immediately. But like, all you have to do when you mess up is genuinely apologize.
Yes.
Like, nobody is looking for, like, it sounds manipulative because you're like, it's not that simple. It kind of is that simple, though. Genuinely be sorry and apologize genuinely, and don't expect the other person to accept your apology.
Yeah, that tends to be what, this quote unquote canceling ends up being, where sometimes discourse will then happen on the timeline is just, I think people sometimes forget that like we're not just like online faces, that like we're actually like human beings too.
For sure.
So like we as humans can also kind of accept and see the nuance in these conversations and like see the level of like bigoted or like the level of offensive somebody's being. And if that's something that, there's no amount of reparation you can give that person to be able to forgive you. Okay.
Absolutely.
If that's essentially boiling that down to, that's what people then call cancel culture, is just people they can't forgive them. And that's okay.
Right.
We're allowed to do that as humans if it's going to be harmful to us.
Right. And you're allowed to step away from somebody who's hurting you. I'll address it. So I recently obviously was in a scenario where I made a big boo-boo, and in no shape or form did I ever, consider myself canceled. What I did consider is that I made a really big boo-boo, and then I needed to fix it because that's what I like to do. I it was heavy on my conscience. And there was a big like push from me to figure out, and I don't know, like this might be its own trauma response and might be its own problem. But when I mess up, my goal is to, how can I fix it at the very least in a way where my conscience will be okay. Like, will be like, I know that I am trying to repair this. I know that I am doing my best. And I understand that it is like, so that's all accountability. That's all this like really, really big word, accountability, that ends up being framed as you're being canceled. I think the perception of being canceled is what makes you canceled.
Yeah.
Because you're not because like, again, people who want to forgive you will forgive you. And people who don't want to forgive you do not have to forgive you. They don't. And blaming them for not forgiving you ain't gonna make them any happier about it.
God, no.
Yeah.
Absolutely not.
Yeah. No, but that is the big issue, because I felt a lot, because being in the middle of a scenario I felt a lot of guilt over being like, no, there's a very clear cut side of where I messed up that I need to like take a stance socially to let people know that I messed up and I know I messed up and here's what I'm going to do about it and here's how I'm going to work on it, and I'm most importantly, I'm sorry. But that left the other side to be like, how dare you? How dare you not take my side? And I'm going into the weeds here. I'm sorry. Is this okay?
Okay. Hey, it's your show.
But you're on it. God damn.
So is yay.
But
I'm a guest.
It's hard to pick a stance and know that you're doing the right thing by the right people.
Yeah.
Because what will happen is the other side, if it is the side that is not taking accountability is not going to be happy with the side that if it is the side that goes, well, nothing is my problem and it actually wasn't my fault and here's everybody else who messed up and this is fine. I went through extreme amounts of guilt because I felt like I turned away from someone to turn to somebody else.
Right.
What really happened is that I reassessed the situation and said, I messed up and there is clearly a wrong here and I'm going to take accountability. And the other person said, well, I'm not going to do that. Right.
And I think what's important, and I think this is sometimes something people don't always think about either, is like, it's so much better to come at these situations as humans and not just as like public faces. Because I think sometimes people try to just like throw together an apology or like,
what's going to make me look good instead of what's going to be repair the situation.
What's going to repair the situation and what's going to make me feel like I made the right choice.
Right.
Like, because, I think that's where the joke of like notes app apologies come in, because people just throw together an apology that's like, you can clearly tell it's meant to save face. And when people don't want to accept that apology, like, you shouldn't really be all that like surprised because one, they don't have to. Two, I think we as humans can tell when we're being duped. So like, do it. Like, if you're going to like try to make amends for any discourse that you may have caused and hurt that you may have dealt out, at least like do it from the heart. I think it'll sound better.
But I think genuinely it takes a moment, like, no, again, we're back to that like middle moment, right, of the reflection. And then what do you decide to do in that moment? Do you decide to double down or do you decide to go, I might have messed up? Right. Like another example, I'm trying to speak in like firmer examples, but another example, I posted this tweet and it was a very short video of me doing yoga, drinking water, and running. And the joke was like, oh, none of these cured my depression. And a bunch of people came out and were super upset that, like, first of all, like, I wasn't depressed. And those are just trolls. And we put that aside. But there were a few comments that were like, are you implying that these things wouldn't help people with depression?
Oh.
But like you said, oh, and went, And that's what I did. And I'm not saying like I'm like some amazing person that like always gets it. Like, I make mistakes when I try to reevaluate myself too. But it's not that hard to put yourself in the other person's shoes and be like, that's not what I meant, but I still understand that you saw that way. And that doesn't change the fact that you saw it this way and this hurt you. And this is not, that might not be like, my intention matters, but not as much as how it was perceived. And so that needs to be addressed. Like, whether you apologize, whether you explain yourself, whatever it might be, taking that moment to be like, hey, if a bunch of people are coming out and saying I messed up, could I have messed up? I just as a human study, I wonder what makes people double down in those moments. Because again, like, I think like, is it my trauma that goes like, oh my God, everything's my fault, and that's why I apologize? Or like, is it like, what makes somebody I should probably have like a mental health professional on. Any thoughts and hypotheses? Like, what makes somebody double down?
Stubbornness. I think good old just stubborn attitudes can sometimes be a part of it. But I think, there are definitely some people who just feel like they are right. They just, maybe in that moment, they just feel like they are absolutely correct. And I think in your example, like what I'm seeing is like you are correct. Like in that video, like I mean, I did all the same things too. I was working out, I was eating healthy, I was drinking, like staying hydrated.
Right.
Guess what? I still needed medication for my depression. So like I see what you're going like for with that. And I think that's kind of when you have to like there was probably like no need to like push back against that person, because I think it's one of those things where like they, like you were saying, they saw something. So it's just kind of you being like, hey, no, I made this because da da da, and I definitely agree with you. I think it's just kind of, it's one of those like clearing the air sort of things. If one person's unsure of something, then like you just got to make sure that like you get on the same page, just like communication. Like you could also online, you can only have communication can be so hard,
Right.
because on Twitter, if you're doing it publicly, you only have 280 characters,
Right.
And you have to be very intentional with your wording, or else people may read into it differently, or may like pick up a certain tone from it.
Could get worse. Right.
Yeah, so it becomes hard to have conversations like that.
Right. No, and I agree with that, but because you see people that are like, if you just apologize and took, again, that word, and took accountability for this is like, I see your side, that's not what I meant, but I can still see your side. Like the two, it's not black and white. It's it's back to that nuance. There's a gray area of neither of us both of us can be right. And that doesn't make either of us wrong.
Yes. Like, I think that's a huge thing to say. Both people, there can be two sides that are right. Yeah, exactly what you said. I'm just retweet.
Retweet. Okay. Verbal retweet. Yeah.
Verbal retweet.
Yeah. No, I think about that a lot, because like people mess up all the heck in time, and all you have to do, like there was something else I tweeted that was super benign recently, that I was like, listen to your friends or something, and somebody tweeted back and they're like, actually, your friends don't owe it to you to like listen to you if you give them advice or something, and they got really upset, and all it took is for me to like give a little bit of validation to that person and be like, your point's also correct. You seem still angry about, like, you seem really angry about it, and I'm probably not that angry, but like, okay, that part of your point.
Yeah, I think when it comes to like holding yourself accountable or holding people accountable, I think it's one of those things where like if somebody says something blatantly disgusting, like back to the big-titted thoughts or stealing my viewers, like that's when somebody should be held accountable, because that's not something that you can just be like, that's not something you can just claim ignorance on. That's something that you've developed a whole thought from like preconceived notions.
Well, that's I always also, to me at least, if you're using those big, knowingly offensive words, like you've chosen to use the word thought. That did not just pop out of your brain because it was an accident. Big titted, like those were all decisions. Those were definitely solid decisions that were made. I'm going to call them big, because you could have worded it in so many, you could have said girls who use their bodies for views. You could have said whatever you think that is, right? You could have worded it in like 40 ways that could have potentially not been as offensive as like big titted thoughts.
Right.
I can't even repeat that. I'm sorry.
I like the way you said it though.
Yeah. Well, again, I'm doing my best bigot impression.
It was very good.
Thank you so much. I'll take my Oscar now. But I genuinely, I look at it and I see like you've made choices, and you definitely think that there is no going around that your opinion is correct.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I think if it's one thing where I think that's where also like, I think sometimes we as humans can also see when something might be coming from ignorance, as in like I literally just did not know, like, and when it comes to like things like that, that's when, you made a choice to be offensive. But when somebody maybe like, I think we can also see when things are in good faith. Sure. So when like, oh, maybe this was meant in good faith, but then, that wording was, like, that's when like the holding accountable part is kind of like, hey, like, I see where you're going with this, but the way you said that, it can imply this and this and this. And then that's where you have to be like, oh, I'm sorry, I messed up. Like, if you just say that, cool, we can move on. We can, we know that you internalized this, learned a lesson, great. But I think that's when that, like, if that double down comes, where it's like, no, what I said was not offensive, because then you're like, okay, well, I guess I'm wrong, even though I'm offended.
Right. Right.
Like, even though I gave you reasons why I'm offended.
Is it wrong to be, can you be wrong to be offended? I guess, actually, that's a question for the community too. I would love to hear takes in the community. Like, can you be offended in a, what?
There is that like big, like, quote. I know that somebody, I don't remember who said it, but it's like that quote where it's like, just because you're offended doesn't mean you're right. And I think I think that's too big of a phrase, because like there is truth to it, but I think once you break it down, like there's way too much nuance to it. Like, if you're offended that gay people exist,
does it all come back to human rights? Is that where we are here? Because I'm comfortable. I'm comfortable with it going back there.
Yeah. Are you offended that women exist on the internet? Like, when it comes down to certain things like that, that's when it's like, okay, no, you're not right.
You're just not right. Well, we had somebody in our last stream who, unfortunately, we did end up removing from the community. Fortunately, we did end up moving from the community, but it's unfortunate that we weren't able to like help them see, I guess. God, I don't know. That sounds terrible too. But like, basically their argument was, it's okay for me not to like gay people because of my religion. And right, like that I think that ties really nicely to like what we're talking about here. And it's not okay. It's genuinely not okay. Like, if you aren't gonna tell me that I'm wrong for existing, that I don't care why you think that. I don't care. Like, there is nothing so obsolete that you can't sit down and think for yourself and be like, my religion says this, which, by the way, it doesn't. It says to love everybody. But like, my religion says this, and I have to abide by that. And I know we can get, I'm without getting into like religious talk, I don't want to go down that path, but like, in the sense of like, everybody has a right to follow whatever they want. If it helps you, like, awesome, again. But if you're using it as a way to justify hurting other people, that's where my issue lies.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. It just sucks. Like, it just, like, how do you think that is going to be perceived? How can that be perceived in a positive light in any shape or form? How can that be kind? Like, you're not okay because of who you are, but it's okay for me to say that because of who I am.
Interesting. I just think of that like picture from Jake and Josh where she's just interesting.
They updated it and made my heart.
I know,
so
it's
happy.
so good.
So happy. So I have it in my drafts. I have a tweet ready in my drafts, and I will use it. But it's
perfect.
It's not time yet. It's not time yet.
Oh, it will be.
It will be. The time will come. But I am offended on behalf of X, I guess. Oh, do you have thoughts on that? Because I'm trying
to. Yes.
Okay.
Because if you say that you're offended on behalf of a person or on behalf of a community, that sounds a lot like speaking over that person or that community.
Ooh, yes. Okay, that's such a good way to put it. Yes.
Unless you have like a very like well-researched opinion where you're like, I've seen people of this community say this and this and this, and that's why I feel what you said is offensive. That's different. But if you are just saying, I'm offended on behalf of this community and you should take this down, or whatever they're trying to like say to hold you accountable, that's so interesting line we're treading. Because it's just like, okay, like, you're coming in here to say you're offended. No one, I don't feel like anyone else is. I wonder, where is this coming from? Like, I think if I were to hear that, I would be confused more so than, oh, this must be offensive. Maybe I would do my own research to try and figure out why, but that's where that conversation would stop.
I think, to me, this is very similar to people accepting apologies for on behalf of other people. I think it's
Mm,
very the same
yes.
in my
Oh
mind.
yeah.
It's very much like, oh, you look like you're really sorry about this. It's totally okay that you did that. And you're looking around and you're like, did they ask you to absolve them of this?
No, also like you're not the person who got hurt.
Right. You don't get to decide that it was okay what they did. I mean, it probably didn't, if I'm going to be completely honest, it probably didn't affect you. If you can absolve somebody of their of their wrongdoing with the drop of a whatever, it probably didn't affect you.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Yeah. I maybe I would say that that's similar to being offended on somebody else's behalf. Like,
I would have to agree. Because it's not your place to jump in there and say that. It's, it's just not. Like, I think that sometimes that's where it's like kind of like mind your business unless they're like, or people are actually harming other people.
yeah, yeah. You put off a bad vibe. That's really interesting. That is, Mythic Mitch brings up a point of like putting off a bad, but some people do put off a bad vibe. Like when
Yeah.
when somebody, I mean, when somebody comes in. Okay, go ahead. I'm thinking.
So yeah, no, I think that's, that's just, again, being a human. Sometimes we're going to get vibes from somebody that we just don't like.
Right.
I can't tell you how many times I've had like not so good of a vibe about somebody, but everyone seems to love them. So it's like, it's not my place to just be like, this person gives me a bad vibe. They're bad. Like, nah, maybe our vibes just don't mesh, and that's okay. I don't
Right.
have to like drag them down just because like our vibes aren't clicking.
Right. But sometimes you have a really good reason for that.
Sometimes sometimes if you see something or if something tipped you off and you're like, that might need some further investigation. That's different. But if
Right.
it's just like, I'm getting a bad feeling because I don't know, you just getting a bad feeling, but without really any explanation, like nobody can really go off of that.
Right.
There's really nothing tangible to be like, oh yeah, you're right.
Right. But sometimes it's not. I think the worst is when you see that, you get that bad vibe, but it's not your place to fight that fight. Again,
Yes.
going back to like, okay, this is not okay. And especially this happens with friends, right? Like you mistreated my friend. Now I really don't want to talk to you, but I also would like to expose you because what you did is done shitty, but it's not my story. It's my friend's story to expose. Right. That's tough.
It is tough.
Yeah.
Oof.
Yeah. Interesting. Fuss Bubbles brings up a really good point. Accepting apologies. If I see someone made an honest attempt and the other person just refuses to accept it, at least I can take that into account. But that is for you. I don't think that's for you to absolve, but I think it's fair for you to be like, oh, well, I think that apology was sufficient. But it's not for you to be like, that apology was acceptable. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, there's a level of, I think you can tell when somebody put thought into apologizing, and really you can see when it's like actually taking responsibility and not trying to make it like, not trying to like take their hands off the wheel sort of a thing, being like, yeah, well, that happened because this and this and this. I think oftentimes we see a lot of people try to blame other things on
excuses, right?
Making excuses. And I think that's, when you can tell that someone's actually being like, I did mess up and I'm, this is me apologizing for that and wanting to do better. No, the person, the people affected aren't the ones that have to like accept the apology. But I think on some level you can be like, okay, there was some thought put into this, but yeah, don't ever be like, this was a good apology.
Right.
Or like anything that could like, put out like, the impact of like you accepting that for them. I think if thank you for like addressing this, thank you for saying something, like that's valid. That's a little more neutral, because then you're at least like, well, at least you did the right thing in apologizing.
Or thank you for addressing it in this way. Or I hope that they see that you're sincere. Like, again, just not accepting it, but you can validate. We're back at that word. You can validate the other person for their apology. You could say like, this seems like a really nice apology, but you cannot accept it on the other person's behalf. Like, you can validate the person and be like, I think you did a good job apologizing. It's not for me to accept your apology, but I think you did a good job apologizing.
Right. And I think you can always, you can always make that, point noted where you're like, I'm not trying to accept your apology on anybody's behalf, but this is how I feel about the apology itself.
Yeah. So. Yeah. Even parents shouldn't do that. Like, he said, sorry, you have to accept it. That's BS. I love how people try to disempower others. Right. Interesting. Fuzz bubbles. Okay. Counterpoint. We got to fuzz bubbles. If something racist is said in a small group of white people, I can be offended and tell that person not to be racist as a white person.
Yes.
And you probably should be, but then you're not.
And you should.
I would say then you're not speaking over, right? Like, but I think if you're, again, I'm just picturing this, like, let's say there's a group of like 5 people and 4 of them are white and there's 1 black person and something racist was said and you're like, apologize to them right now. That's weird.
That's a little weird.
Right? Like, I would tell you if I was offended by that. That's not for you to decide.
Yeah. I think in a situation like that, when you are like, if you're just a bunch of you and all your white friends hanging out together and you yourself are white and somebody says something racist, I think if you are saying, hey, that's racist, it's either what they said was blatantly racist to the point where like you can't ignore it, or you're coming from a place where you've had enough, you've listened enough or like heard enough perspectives from, maybe friends who are people of color, to where you can come from and be like basically speaking in place of them using words and points that they have said themselves.
But I think you should accredit that, right? In that case?
Right. You should be like, hey, I've heard a lot of people from the community that you're speaking about right now say that is offensive because, and that's when you list why, because then you're not like creating some reason in your head on like why they should be offended, even though like maybe you've never heard them be offended about something like that. Right. I think that's when you can get into some like weird territory.
Okay. Well, like I'm trying to put it in like more firm things for myself, right? So like if somebody said, if we were standing, like, again, if we're in a group and somebody says, that's crazy, and then somebody says, oh, Em doesn't like when people say that word, so don't use that around her, I would consider that talking over me. I would not consider that empowering.
Mm-hmm.
But if somebody said like, yeah, I actually can't think of a scenario, because I'm also thinking like, well, what if that person can't speak up? Like, because sometimes you are like grateful because you're like, thank you for saying something. I didn't know if it was my place to say something. So nuance. We're back at that word, nuance.
Back at nuance. Yeah. There's always going to be, depending on the situation, depending on the severity, depending on the word used, depending on what the subject, it's a lot.
Yeah.
It's always a lot.
Yeah. Not talking over, that's considered raising the voice, but that's, speaking for you.
Right.
I love this stuff. I love these conversations with you because they always make me noodle stuff. And like, we agree enough, but then like, we don't disagree, but we have different nuances to how we see things. And that makes me think. And that goes back to like living in your own bubble. You can have nuanced conversations with people who agree with you. Like there's this idea that like, if people agree with you, you won't learn anything unless you argue with people. And I very strongly disagree with that. Because I think you can learn a ton from people who think like you. I'm not saying you can't learn from arguments. You absolutely can. But I've unlearned way more from arguments where it's just 2 people yelling at each other points. Like all I learned in those situations is that like, well, that person's a bigot and I really don't want to have a conversation with them again. I don't learn like, wow, they really do make a good point about white supremacy. You know what I mean? Like I'm not going to walk away from that conversation feeling better. And if they're racist and, believe in white supremacy, they're not going to walk away believing in what I'm saying either. So I think there's a lot to, if 2 people want to come together and have a conversation about stuff they don't see eye to eye on, that's awesome. That's amazing. But to assume that just because somebody surrounds themselves with people who think like them, that they are not being, not contradicted, but not being, challenged in some way, I strongly disagree with that.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I think because I mean, hey, I've been out as gay for like, God, 11-ish years now. Like I'm at a point in my journey where I'm like, listen, I'm not going to debate certain things about my identity with anybody. So like, that's like a bare minimum. So like, if you're going to try to like challenge me on certain things regarding that, like, I already have a level where it's like, nope, we're not
Like
having
you
that
see that
discussion.
coming. You see that where you're like, I know where you're going. I don't want any of this.
No, and it's exactly that. Cause like I'm at a point now where it's just like, I'm not gonna have that discussion anymore. I don't
Right.
need to. So like I'm going to surround myself with people who feel similarly about that or feel the exact same because it's not my job to like, it's not my job to please everybody about that.
Yeah. Man,
Literally not my job.
literally, I've bent over so backwards for people who will never see, ever see my point or validate me as a human, like, period.
That's awful.
Yeah. Yeah. Jeff, you're wonderful.
You're
Oh
wonderful.
my God, no, you're wonderful. I don't even know that we actually went to, no, we kind of went through all of our points. Okay, I feel good. I was like, did we even talk about what we came to talk about?
I think there was one thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, kind of. No, we kind of did because we did kind of talk about kindly calling out bigots
Did
in
we?
a sense. Not
Well,
really.
not
We
really.
kind of graced it, like maybe
We
like
did it on the surface.
we felt its air pass us by.
Right, right.
Um,
How do you do that? How do
how do
how do be nice to
uh,
people who are not so nice?
the thing I want to preface this with first is that first of all, depending on who you are, you don't necessarily have to be. Because I think there's a level of like microaggressions that people do so often to a point where you're like, I'm upset. You know how often people tell me this in a day? I'm just
Right.
mad now.
Right.
So like if you react in a way that seems angry, like that doesn't make their point any less valid about
Ooh,
why they're
don't get
calling
me
you out.
started. Don't get me started. I'm not allowed to be angry. I'm a tiny little blonde girl with blue eyes. Like, I'm not allowed to express any anger or dislike. The
Oh, I
amount of
know.
times, and also I'm a mental health advocate. I can't ever disagree with somebody or call them out for being a shit on the timeline. I can't do that. That's considered, I've seen it. I've seen it all. And it like, it gets me. It gets my engines revving of like, it's silencing. Sorry, go ahead.
It is silencing, and it's tone policing. um, so, and I think the thing too is, there are kind ways to call people out, and I think more often than not, people are doing it. I think people are already calling people out in a kind way, because I think there's a difference between nice and kind.
Mm-hmm.
If I were to call you out in a nice way, I would be like, sweetie, I see what you were trying to do with this, but see that with the words you're saying, that's not what it means. In a kind way, me saying you fucked up, that's still kind, because I'm saying you messed up and you need to fix that. Like that's kind. That's telling it like it is. That's something like I'm telling you that like fix this. And more often than not, that's what people do when they call out people who are, being offensive on the timeline, people who are, saying really disgusting things. Because we don't have to play nice. We don't have to play nice with these people, because we're probably never going to actually be their friend.
But what about being the bigger person? This is, I mean, I know this is probably like a whole separate conversation. We're supposed to be wrapping up. So like, I think this happened last time too. But like, we definitely did this last time. But the tone policing, the telling me that like I am unkind. Like, Kartha, I get where you're coming from. The problem is when people blast straight past those kind ways. If you are unkind and you are the bully first, if you approached me and you are the bully first, I do not owe you to be kind in return. It is the nice thing to do. It is the polite thing to do. Is it the required thing to do? That's not. I don't think that that's okay to expect somebody to be slapped in the face and then be like, okay, other cheek. I don't think so.
No,
I don't think
no,
so. I just don't think so.
no. It's, I'm trying to look at that blowing past straight. I think if you're in a position where you feel like they've blown past ways to be kind in a way to like point out something that you've done that's offensive, I think that's a really good time to sit back and maybe be in their shoes and
Sure.
try to think like, okay, why did they get so angry so quickly about this? Maybe this is something they deal with a lot. Maybe this is a question or a thing that people say to them a lot and nobody like, that's where my head starts going.
Mhm.
Like if someone starts to get angry, I'm like, okay, like why are they getting angry? And if I feel like it's very sudden, like, or maybe even be like, there's a way to, again, there's a way to communicate. If you felt like someone got really angry, then you can be like, hey, I kind of want to understand like what's going on here. Like I want to understand why what I said is offensive. Because if you genuinely want to do better,
Mhm.
we will see that,
Right.
and we will be more willing to take the time to do so in a kind way, which might not necessarily be what your version of kind is too, but it's going to be a way that we see as this is not going to have any negative impact on you.
Because I could even see me then going back and being like, you know what? I'm sorry. I reacted very strongly because I hear this all the time. And I understand actually you didn't mean that. Like, I will go back and I will be like, actually, that wasn't right. What I don't, not that that wasn't right, but like, actually, that may have been a little bit strong reaction compared to what you said. And I think that's okay for me to say. I don't think it's okay for somebody to come in and be like, oh, that was aggressive of you.
Well,
You don't know the weight of what I'm saying. You don't know.
right. No. And I think when somebody says like that was a little too aggressive, especially in certain situations of like, since it's Pride Month, if you're going to say that we're being too aggressive about ways that we defend ourselves as like the queer community, and if you want to go into like intersections too, when it's, queer POC, people of color, there are layers and layers of like microaggressions and things like that because there's just so much they have to deal with. And so when you like label them as just aggressive because of like this thing that you said, which was probably was offensive, and they're calling it out, it's because of how often they hear that. Like
Right.
they're allowed to be upset and they are allowed to come off as aggressive because if nobody's ever listened before, what else are they left to do other than to be louder?
No, it's totally true. I think, and this is usually hits minority groups, right? Like, why aren't you? Somebody was racist towards you. Why weren't you nicer in your response? Like, clearly they're going some. Why do we take the side? And I've said this before. Why do we take the side of the bully? Why aren't we taking more time to help the person who was just freaking hurt?
Yeah.
Why aren't we focusing on that? Why the bully made that action? And I'm not saying we don't need to deal with their mental health. Like, clearly, the bully also deserves mental health attention. But if they're deciding to use, their energy and everything, if they're deciding to use their wrath to hurt other people, we need to be helping the people they're hurting, because otherwise you get more bullies.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's ridiculous to tell somebody who did the hurtful thing, hey, remember that time you had a brain fart? I'm also having one.
Oh,
Woo!
hello.
It's so ridiculous to be the one who's like doing the offending and then being like, why were you not nice to me in return?
Right. That blows my
Like,
brain. That like
like
does not two and two don't match up there at all.
Yeah, and I mean there are times that people do that in such a manipulative way to a point where we feel bad for reacting. We feel bad for having an
Yeah.
emotional reaction, and like no, like if you made someone mad, there's probably a reason. Don't
Right.
just label them as aggressive and like dismiss it.
Right. And that goes back to like, explanations versus excuses with mental health, like somebody being like, "Oh, well, I was suffering and that's why I did that." No, that is you're using mental health as an excuse. I will not allow that.
Right.
What is definitely okay is the fact that oh my gosh, I lashed out because I'm feeling this and this and this, that doesn't make your lashing out okay. What I don't want to hear is that other part about how you say that like you've excused yourself over what you've done because of this reason. You can have a reason, but that does not excuse you. Those are two different things.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. I expect niceness because I've always received it, even if they look mad. Yeah. Okay. I guess that's just like maybe a good time to privilege check too, right?
Right. Yeah. And I think I want to go back to like nice versus kind.
Let's do it.
I always think I think we use those words interchangeably, and
they're not the same.
They're not the same. You can be nice without being kind. And you can be kind in a way that doesn't look nice. And I think when people are doing things, and if you feel a certain way about how they might be trying to correct you, like maybe be like, where are they coming from? If they're not doing like obvious things like calling you names or berating you, like, things that could be considered like verbally abusive, like, then their way of doing things is probably kind still. They're probably just upset. And that's okay. It's okay to be upset, especially if you say something that, is offensive. And if it's something that they've had to hear so often in their lives.
Yeah. Yeah. You're lovely. Did I mention that you're lovely?
You're lovely.
No, you're lovely. You're coming back. You're coming back.
I like coming back.
Good.
It's great.
Good. And if you ever have reason to talk, like I'll come, whatever you have, I'll always be there at the drop of a dime.
Yeah, I would. Yes.
Okay. Also, PSA, if anybody's watching this and is a dungeon master who is interested in hosting a Sailor Moon focused, please.
That's right. Yes.
Please.
We had yes.
Neither of us are DMs. It's painful. Yeah. It's right there.
Yes. You came to me about that. Oh my God. Months and months ago. And I was like, that'd be great.
No, but like, neither of us had any, like, that was it. There was nowhere to go from there. Like, we kind of wrote ourselves into a corner. We're like, this would be great if we had the right people. We don't have the right people.
Yeah. I just like, anyone with DMing experience, help.
Yes, because I would love to do it, but I feel like I wouldn't do as good of a job. Like, I really want that campaign to do well because I feel like it could do so awesome.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Blood, I'm not sure what you're talking about. I feel like lowering their standards. I do understand we need to be louder when people listen. It's more. Oh, and then I started reading the games and online harassment. Never mind. Sorry. Oh my gosh. But by the way, do check them out, fam. If you are looking for resources and you need help, they are around from 3 to 7 p.m. Pacific daily. I highly recommend them as a resource. That. Yeah. And what no matter what you're experiencing, they're great in the gaming community. Highly recommend them. Okay, so but people are okay, just because aggression won't get people what they want, devil's atrocity, does not mean that aggression is not a valid thing. Aggression is just as valid. Anger, aggression, they're all still valid emotions. They're just, and by being like, well, if you're aggressive, like, you could be doing this a better way. You're just, again, you're tone policing over actually considering this person's emotions. And like all too many times I've heard like, don't be so angry. No.
Yeah.
Don't tell me what I should be feeling right now. I have a hard enough time letting myself feel things. I don't need you telling me.
People labeling people as aggressive. It's been used so often to invalidate what they're actually saying. It becomes such a way to be like, oh, well, because you said it this way, we're not actually going to listen to you.
Right.
Like there are so many times I've said a certain thing about being a gay person, and then someone being like, well, maybe you don't deserve rights because you said it that way.
Right.
Like, oh, so us as an entire community deserves to just be second-class citizens and, be fired for who we are because we're a little upset about the way you're treating us. that's my feelings on you know,
Yeah.
the aggressive minority.
Yeah, well, that also goes back to like victim blaming and all that good stuff, because it's the same nonsense to look and be like, well, she deserved it because she was dressed, whatever.
Ugh. Yep.
It's in the same vein. It's in the same. Well, like if you were nicer about it, maybe people would listen to you. Yeah, but maybe I'm really mad, and I'm allowed to be mad about it. Maybe just for a second. Just for a second, I'm allowed to be. And frankly, if one person came to me and said, hey, you're valid in being angry, maybe I'd be less freaking angry about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Maybe. Good. Claps in chat for that. Dang.
So I pitched what I'm...
That was great.
Because I get so uncertain. I'm like, if I say in a very high-pitched voice that only dogs can hear the frequency, surely I won't offend anybody, because I can't offend anybody. How dare I? How dare I?
How dare? How dare?
Anyway, okay, I am gonna let you go because, like, I'm holding you over. I love you.
You're
so
good.
much.
You're good.
Oh, gosh, I love you so. This is
it was
so
great,
wonderful.
as per usual.
Okay, all right. Tell everybody where they can find you.
So you can find me pretty much everywhere at Jeff Brutlag. Twitch, Twitter. I'm on Instagram. I've been posting TikToks recently.
They're lovely.
So many good things. These were all the places you can find me. My website will be where like you can find more like written content. It's kind of also like a hub for where you can find everything for where I am online. I'm also raising money for Outright International. They're an international-based charity for LGBTQIA. Fun fact: they're actually the only one that's doing like consulting with the United Nations as far as global efforts for LGBTQIA plus rights. So that is who I'm supporting until the end of Pride Month.
Amazing.
So any streams from now till the end of the month that you come by, I'd love to see you. Even if you can't donate, just being there does help. That's all I got going on right now.
Do you have a schedule, Lovely?
I'm usually live Sundays, Mondays, Thursdays, and Fridays. So, and then we'll be doing like a bonus like final day of Pride Month since it's a Wednesday, I believe. So
yes. Thank you so much for taking the time on a Heckin' Tuesday to show up here.
Of course.
It means the absolute world to me. So thank you for that.
Of course. It's always a pleasure to be here.
Thank you for being a light. All right, fam. We are going to be right back without Jeff. Everybody cry and wave goodbye. Okay.
I'll miss you all.
I know, right? Bye.